Howdy! Michael, a Mercedes guy here, and we're going to do a segment here on these old 3-wire regulators. Now, we've got some other videos up on how to get a regulator out of your door, including the door panel removal and so on. And there is a method of replacing the bad gear, as you can see the teeth are worn off right there, with the gear from the later model 108 regulator. This is from a 108. And installing it on the earlier 3-wire frame, but this customer did so, and it still doesn't function properly. And one of the reasons, as you can see, this is at an angle in here. It's too loose. So we'll address that issue. But the main problem here, this is a treatment of the symptom instead of what the cause is. And what the cause is this transmission that's in here is not designed properly to mesh fully with the teeth on the larger gear segment. When this is installed in there, it will only engage about that much instead of a full engagement. So I'll show how to fix that problem as well. So the first thing we're going to do is pull this apart, clean it, so that I can straighten the housing of the transmission. As you can see, it's bent. And I have to heat it to do that. And of course, you don't want a bunch of grease catching on fire, so I'm going to clean that up. Okay, I've got the transmission off of there and disassembled. And part of the problem is the amount of wear on this bushing for this gear. As you can see, that's considerable. I've found another one that has very little wear. I'm wiggling it. So we're going to use this replacement out of my stock, which I have dozens of these. Then the next thing I'm going to do is straighten this frame. As you can see, it's torqued out of shape. And to do that, I'm going to heat it up with a propane torch. You got to be very careful because you don't want to melt this. Also, these little bosses here, you don't want to mash them. So in a vise, I'm going to put a piece of wood on that side and to clamp it. Then use a big pair of pliers to twist this. But I'll heat it first, then quickly grab it in my vise. Okay, now I have cleaned this really well with solvent and air so that there's no grease in there anymore, because it's going to get pretty warm. Gotta get it a little bit hotter. Okay, that is a lot straighter than it used to be. Okay, it's still got a slight deformity to it, but it is 90% better than it was. And that's important for the meshing of this drive gear to the big gear. So I'm going to dry this off really good and pack it with some grease and reassemble. Okay, now since I've washed the grease out of that bushing, the trick to get grease back in there, I'm going to heat this a little bit and then apply some grease to it, and that will seep into the bushing. Then I'll cool it. So give this a little bit of heat. And have our grease ready. And it's melting the grease. And that will help it get into that bearing again. And then we'll assemble. Okay, before final assembly, these have a little ridge around them here, a little chamfer actually, that has to fit inside these. And since I've straightened this, what commonly happens is they don't quite line up. So a little bit of pressure, I got two of them lining up, so I'm going to force that using the vise and force that together. Before I put the final grease in and the rubber in. Okay, there we go. I'm ready for assembly. So this little rubber boot I've already cleaned. So that's basically a dust protector. So now we can put in our mass of grease here. I want to pretty much fill that cavity with grease. Okay. Then mash this together. Now lots of times this cover comes off and you'll find it land in the bottom of your door. So if that happens, you do want to completely clean that cavity in solvent and compressed air and repack as well. But this one has not come off, so we're okay there. So now we're ready to assemble that. But the next step, and that is these holes are actually in the wrong place. It should be so that this transmission assembly is a little bit closer to the gear drive. So I'm going to pull this gear off, take out these nylons, and pull off the motor. And I'm going to weld in these holes and then file them so that I actually mount this a little bit closer so that it engages fully with these teeth. Because right now it would be about like that. And as you can see from the old gear, the teeth wore off and they were only engaging about halfway. So we're going to fix that problem. Okay, now first we want to take this spring off, and this is very dangerous. So you want to remember how it's oriented, the way this hook goes. Then I'm going to move it over a little bit, and okay, now that's ready to come off of there. You want to be real careful with this process. I'm going to use a pair of real good needle nosers, and there we go. Then there's no chance of that flying off because I had it gripped. Okay. Yeah, you definitely want to get this out of the way so that you don't damage it with any heat. Then, now, if you haven't replaced this big gear with a newer one, then it's actually possible to get this wound out of the way so you can pop these nylons out. And you can actually weld with this gear assembled, because from the factory this is a clenched over unit right here, and you can't take them apart unless you grind that off. So, but since this already has this gear replaced, all I have to do is undo that bolt, and I got to undo it anyway because I'm going to put a spacer washer in there. So we'll take this arm off. That's an 8. Okay.